So efficiency can replace traditional growth. Shortening the work week and sharing the work among people can replace the idea of large numbers of people overworking side by side with large numbers of people underworking. Is this a matter of some dictatorship, some communist or fascist dictatorship calling the shots? No, that's absurd. We live in what today is called a money-centered economy. Money is calling the shots. No one said we need an economic crash in 2008. That was just a dynamic of a money-centered aberration of where investments started to go haywire. And to have what we call a people and planet-centered economics and social entrepreneurship. This is absolutely at our fingertips, and it says you match capacity to need, and once you've met all need, you can start shortening working hours and let people reestablish sane family lifestyles. In fact, all right, I'm going to run out a little example of how haywire we go and then go back to whatever questions are on your mind. So most people have heard the metaphor, if you drop a frog in a pot of boiling water, it knows what's going on and it jumps out immediately. On the other hand, if you put it in a pot of tepid water, turn up the heat, pretty soon you have a cooked frog. It's very similar with people. If we knew where our economy was headed, there's a whole lot of things we would say no to. But we've adapted over time to some very dysfunctional economic policies. What's a good example? If you had said to people 20 years ago, first you're going to give up your family dinners, and that's going to be so fun that then you're going to give up your family weekends, and then you'll say, well, that's not so bad. Why don't we give up our family vacations? Anybody in their right mind would tell you, not going down that road. That is absolutely insane. But when it happens slowly over time and anybody who tries to push back against it is told, well, you'll be easy to replace. Somebody will take your job in a minute. People conform to a form of insanity, which is with every advance in technology, instead of shortening the work week, and I'll give a quick example of that, we will simply speed people up and we will chase money at the pace of technology rather than let technology do the work. Looking down the road at a future like that, that would be called a dystopia, but slowly working our way into it like we have been, that's called normal. And so the new normal post-COVID can begin to challenge some of these things. Now, how can I demonstrate that this is a form of insanity? Well, just imagine 2 banks merge, private sector, 2 colleges merge, could be public universities. 2 nonprofits merge, could be like the YWCA, any nonprofit. So public-private nonprofit, 2 institutions merge. Now, the day before the merger, everybody had the exact same set of skills. They were running their organization. They were doing fine. So what do? We lay off approximately half, and those people are now economically insecure. The other half is working longer and harder and looking over their shoulder for their pink slip. The craziness is there's been no wealth lost. These mergers, we've lost no airlines, we've lost no banks, we've lost no productive capacity. We can serve just as many people. So it's the same with downsizing from technology. It's the same with exporting jobs. We've lost paychecks. We haven't lost wealth. We haven't exported our schools, our healthcare system, our homes, our ability to have construction of homes and autos. What we've lost is paychecks, but paychecks are just a form of purchasing power, which is why we're concentrating on stretching the dollar with a new form of purchasing power. And just tell me when to start describing what we call recovery dollars.
I first want to check in with Deborah. Do you have any comments or any questions? Deborah's
no, but she's also the question I was going to ask was to clarify the recovery dollar concept for the audience, for anybody that didn't watch the last show, because I didn't watch the last show either.
Sure. I think you mean didn't listen to the last show because we were just on the radio.
Yes, sir.
So first I'm going to set a context why this is absolutely standard free enterprise business progress. So my field, part of my field, besides human-centered design, human-centered economics, people and planet-centered economics with a delivery system of social entrepreneurship, and later we'll talk a little bit about how innovation scales in this world today through minimum viable products and early adopters. But my field that I call money innovation is part and parcel of all economic history and all economic paradigm shifts, and it's literally not a field of economics. So what is money innovation? It says that money keeps improving under free enterprise, and those improvements are always technology driven, and those changes in money continuously drive innovation and new economic eras. So what does that mean? That means we went from barter to gold coins based on smelting and metal casting. And barter and gold coins drove the agricultural era for about 3,000 to 5,000 years. Then along came printing, and printing made paper currency and checks possible. And paper currency and checks, printing, paper making, drove the industrial era for about 300 to 500 years. And so another thing you'll notice is that there's an accelerating pace of technological advance, an accelerating pace of money innovation, and an accelerating pace of economic transformation. So finally, along come computers, the internet, mobile apps, and they make e-commerce and digital currency possible. And that's the digital money, the Visa system, PayPal, all of that is totally mature in about 30 to 50 years. So now it doesn't take a rocket scientist to tell that if we figure out a new form of money, a new form of purchasing power to stretch the dollar, not to end run or undermine the dollar, because when we went to paper currency, gold didn't use its value, and slowly over time, because it was inefficient, you stop seeing commerce in gold. And I think those people who think that's the problem in the economy is we're not running an economy based on gold just don't understand the difference between money and wealth. We're drowning in all the things that gold was created to help produce and distribute. We're drowning in agriculture, drowning in healthcare, drowning in education, drowning in automobiles, drowning in they're like automobiles, new and used, are just rolling off the lots, and yet people can't always have a safe automobile, and we think that's sane. Actually, I'm in favor of all kinds of mass transit, and that can also be funded with a new form of purchasing power that we'll call recovery dollars. So what would make this next round of economic innovation, money innovation, take us further than cryptocurrency has taken us? Because what I'm going to argue is cryptocurrency is a fine idea, except it imitated some of the biggest problems in national currencies. For instance, while some people are getting extremely rich by speculating in cryptocurrencies, began with Bitcoin, but now there's 1,000 or more competing cryptocurrencies, a couple thousand or more. We don't see cryptocurrencies creating large numbers of jobs. We don't see cryptocurrencies bringing communities out of poverty. So by taking the speculative feature of the dollar and not taking the economic development power of the dollar, we haven't really solved much with cryptocurrencies. And I'm going to argue, I'm covering some very big economic ideas with elevator pitches. And all I can say is, we're hanging some of I'm working on a book with Tom Fisher, University of Minnesota's world famous 10 times published author in human-centered design. And as I keep mentioning, our work together is in human-centered economics and circular economy economics, so sustainable economics, people and planet-centered economics, and social entrepreneurship as the delivery mechanism for these new economic models. So back to better money design. So what might we do to create the next generation of purchasing power to carry us beyond what the dollar's been able to do? And what I'll argue is we need what's called a ledger currency. See, a ledger currency isn't a scarce token that somebody has and somebody doesn't. And if you want to know how powerful ledgers are already running global corporations. People aren't handing tokens, dollar bills, or even checks back and forth. People are keeping the books on these ledgers. And so universities are run out of ledgers, corporations are run out of ledgers, and passing the tokens back and forth for economic production and distribution is actually a very modest part of all the activity going on. And here are some features that make ledgers a very valuable supplement to token economics, to the dollar as a token that rides the Visa rails as a ledger, rides the ACH system as a ledger. But you have to understand, even if it's digital, it still has token nature. One person has it, another person doesn't. Ledger entries, they don't have token nature. There's no such thing as I have the number 8s and society doesn't have enough number 8s for people to get paid. That's a feature of a token economy and not a feature of a ledger economy. That's why when you have massive excess capacity like food as an abundant renewable resource and hungry people in the U.S. and around the world, a ledger system will measure the excess capacity, measure the unmet need, and make the match. And I'm going to say how you interface a ledger economy with a token economy.
The people that are creaming off the top can't hide what they're doing anymore with the ledger. They won't be able to get away with it. Well, that's wonderful. I really love it.
Well, let me say a few other features of ledgers, and then let me talk a little bit about how a ledger system can interface with a token system to increase everybody's purchasing power and raise everybody up together so it's win-win instead of win-lose. So, number one, ledgers don't crash. So the crash we had in 2008 or the 1929 stock market crash or the massive unemployment through the loss of dollar purchasing power everywhere, that is not a feature of a ledger system. Ledgers do not experience inflation and recession. Tokens, too many tokens, not enough goods and services, inflation. Plenty of goods and services, not enough tokens for people's purchasing power, recession, and ultimately depression. There's no political interference with ledgers. There's no political battle over the numbers in the Visa system, over the numbers in the ACH system. People battle over money. They don't battle over ledgers. And there's no speculation with ledger entries. There's no such thing even as lend me a 9, I'll pay you back a 10. Or if you invest the number 14 in our enterprise, we promise you're going to make a 10 times return on investment. We're going to give you the number 140. It's all absurd in the world of ledgers, but it's all standard fare in the world of tokens. And you see, economics simply does not understand that money is a token that rides on a ledger, but you can have a ledger system that simply measures work to be done, measures available labor, and makes the match. We're always faced with unemployment side by side with unmet needs in communities. Imagine if we had all the measurements, all the money we needed in ledger form to make sure all of our seniors had plenty of food, plenty of shelter, plenty of health care, that all of our schools had plenty of teachers, plenty of computers and things like that. These are all We have more healthcare every day. It's an abundant renewable resource. We have more education every day. It's an abundant renewable resource. And again, this is not a liberal fantasy to be imposed on conservatives. This is a business model that liberals and conservatives, whatever kind of companies they're leading, can take advantage of by pooling their excess productive capacity, using it to back this new purchasing power that we call recovery dollars. Sometimes we call it community service dollars to suggest that it's be earned for volunteerism. But these recovery dollars can be earned, and I'll pause and let you ask some more questions, but can be earned in a big variety of ways. Earned for regular work. In other words, we give employees raises out of the pooled excess capacity. Earned for youth academic performance. Young people are preparing to give back to society. Why can't they be paid in the process? Earned by stay-at-home moms and dads. In the cash economy, we've got paid cooking, cleaning, shopping, laundry, chauffeuring, childcare, senior care. Why on earth does a stay-at-home mom or dad have to be a volunteer when we have plenty of goods and services to reward them with by stretching available cash purchasing power, dollar purchasing power, token purchasing power with ledger purchasing power? All right. I know from thousands of these discussions that it goes in sort of slowly, layer after layer. Those who heard the first show are probably way ahead of those who are hearing this for the first time today.
Right. So you could put all the housing in the world into some kind of ledger system and make sure it gets distributed to everybody who needs a house, right? You can put any kind of resource into the system, and then you would be able to give people credit for all the work that they do. Like some people are caretakers of seniors, some seniors are taking care of the grandchildren. You know, everybody who does some kind of work gets they keep track of it and they get credit for the work that they do. So no more, volunteers like mom and everybody that works for nothing. Is that, am I getting that correctly?
People can certainly volunteer, and if they're well-to-do and they don't need the extra purchasing power, they can certainly donate it away or refuse it or whatever. But you've got the right idea. There's plenty of work to do. There's plenty of people who need jobs. There's plenty of goods and services. There's plenty of people who need those goods and services. Why would money, our own invention, be standing in the way other than it's designed not by conspiracy, and that people have to give up this notion that the broken system or the system's producing amazing wealth. And I forget how this saying goes, but it's the best system we've got at the moment. But that doesn't mean it can't be improved upon dramatically, because it can be, because we can turn excess capacity into available wealth. Now, when you say we pool all the housing, that sounds a little weird and communistic. What we're saying is when there's massive excess housing side by side with massive unmet need, like college dormitories, they're never going to fill up again, most likely in human history. Every campus could donate a dormitory to the homeless, and it comes with a cafeteria, and we could start putting those people to work at anything that matches their skills, at removing the graffiti in the alleys, at being greeters in stores, the way we've got developmentally disabled people being greeters in stores. We could be sending the currently homeless back to school. I mean, they weren't always homeless, and lots of people got into a downward spiral of unemployment. I mean, there's just how much crime comes from bad economics. Big topic.
Maybe a computer-based system, like we can put in all the jobs that the world has, right? We can put in all the housing that's there, and that includes like the box stores that are no longer to be used. We've built a lot. We've invested a lot of our time, energy, money, this generation and previous generations, building all of these buildings. So now they're sitting there empty. They're not going to go back to where they once were. So we could reallocate these resources to those who are in need, who are living under the bridge in Los Angeles, right? So here are the people who are in need. Here's what
That's really good, and it's not just a poverty program. It's so important to get that middle-class people, formerly middle-class people, working people everywhere are suffering a decline in their standard of living and quality of life, which is absolutely unnecessary when technology is only better every day, infrastructure's only better every day, human skill, knowledge, and creativity is only better every day. It's a money problem, a money problem, a money problem. I just needed, if people think, oh my God, this is, instead of having the government and the nonprofit sector and corporate foundations all working on poverty, now we're going to build one more giant poverty program. It's not that at all. It's about how people everywhere are working too long and too hard for too little. And, instead of taxing to solve problems and building extra government programs and extra nonprofit programs, we have more than enough. Instead of starting one more of everything, which just adds downward pressure on market share, prices, profits, and wages. Let me give one quick example and then back to you guys asking questions. The sharing economy 10 years ago, when mobile apps and social media had a tiny fraction of the penetration into the economy that they have today, literally created millions of jobs and billions of dollars of new wealth in a few years. Now, they did it by capturing the excess capacity of a handful, a small percentage of social entrepreneurs, people with an empty room in their home or an extra house for rent, people with an idle car and driver. Now, if the world made any sense at all economically, those billions of dollars in new wealth would have raised everybody up together. But this is the most important thing to get out of this critique of what isn't working in our free enterprise system. Instead of raising everybody up together, win-lose competition over money said somebody needs to take the hit. So who took the hit from Airbnb? Hotels, motels, and their employees. Who took the hit from Uber and Lyft? Cab drivers, limo drivers, and their companies. So instead, the whole idea that instead of a rising tide raising all boats, which isn't happening, we actually do have a zero-sum game. It's not 100% zero-sum. We're obviously making certain kinds of progress, but when one person gets the raise... Joel,
hold that thought. We're on break.
We're
on break. We'll be back in about 4 minutes, but pick up where you left off. And I have to do a little correction.
Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take freedom!
The future is uncertain. I know this. Death is inevitable. I know this. But one thing is certain. As free men, it is our right to live unencumbered and in peace. And those times are quickly drawing to an end. And in these times, peace is certainly an illusion. And as the chains grow tighter, our ability to slip those chains increase incrementally with every passing moment. Inaction is no longer an option. It's time to raise our voices like a cacophony of thunder and lightning and tell the masters no more. And this is Nighthawk, and I say, for myself, no more. Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, because freedom is slipping away.
Hello, my name is Mr. Rowe. I am the host of Reality Extraction, Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. I utilize logic, intellect, and magic to methodically atomize, vivisect, analyze, examine, study, scrutinize, and extract an essence of reality from a fog of illusion and confusion. You can find me on Studio B every Thursday, 1700 hours Pacific Time, that's 8 p.m. Eastern, No topic taboo, no subject too strange. I strive to take a neutral standpoint during the dissection of the topic at hand. That's Reality Extraction with Mr. Rowe on Revolution Radio.
Narco-syndicalist commune. We take it in turns to act as a sort of executive officer for the week. Yes. But all the decisions of that officer have to be ratified at a special bi-weekly meeting. Yes, I see. By a simple majority in the case of purely internal affairs. Be quiet. But by a 2/3 majority in the case of more... Be quiet. I order you to be quiet. Look, you stupid bastard, you've got no arms left. Yes, I have. Look. It's just a flesh wound.
I don't believe I've seen such a display of courage, skill, nerve, grace, and stupidity.
I'll do you for that. Oh, what? Come here. What are you going to do, bleed on me? I'm invincible. You're a loony. The Black Knight always triumphs.
Roundtable Live, Monday through Friday, 1 a.m. till 4 a.m. Eastern Time. Bring your mind, bring your ideas, bring your voice. King Arthur had nothing on us here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com.
Did you ever feel that things were not quite right? That everything was just ever so slightly askew?
Do you have, to paraphrase Morpheus, a splinter in your mind?
If you're interested in hearing the latest information about UFOs, the paranormal,
ancient cultures and structures,
monatomic elements,
longevity,
fantastic discoveries in science,
download it to your brain,
then tune into us. Hi, I'm Dave.
And I'm Mackie.
And we are Shiny Side Out, Sundays 2 to 4 a.m. Eastern. See you then.
Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. You don't need to expect us. We're already here. All right. Thanks for listening while we took that short break here at Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com. And now we're going to get back to your host.
Aloha and welcome back to Stargate to the Cosmos. And I am your host, Jennifer Lessin, and my co-host is Dr. Sasha. Alex Lessin, our producer, is Deborah DeFranco, and Joel Hodroff is our guest today. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go up to the donation button on revolution.radio and make your monthly or your one-time donation. If you go up to the tab at the top left, or your recurring donation by clicking on the Patreon button at the top in the middle. Okay, before we return to our show, let's see if everybody's back. Dr. Lessin, are you there? Are you in place, ready to go?
I'm definitely in place, and I want Joel. There's this idea in sort of the transcendental existential framework that I operate in, that our intentions are manifest in what we've got, and so the crisis situation, the perturbations that we're feeling in our society, in a sense, if you can sort of integrate them, and I think that's what your work does. That's what excites me about it. You have a chance of moving to a higher level. And so I think that all of this stuff has been percolating through your life to make you an ambassador who's showing a way to bring it all together in a way that it doesn't exclude anyone, but it makes it all work. And so I think this is really important stuff, and I'm really glad you're here on our show. Thank you.
Thank you, Sasha.
Thank you, Sasha.
Oops, you got a
Mute.
So I just want to tell people where to find me, because we're going to build a new website, and we're in transition. But find me on LinkedIn. It's Joel Hodroff, JoelHodroff. Reach out, mention the show. I will link in with you and send some additional introductory materials. It was funny for me to listen to the Revolution Radio advertising on the break, because I'm so straight. I grew up in a family that owned a Jewish mortuary, and if anybody knows what a preacher's kid is, I grew up sort of like a preacher's kid. So whereas a lot of people who think outside the box about money and about economic transformation are starting neighborhood barter clubs or anti-Walmart local currencies or anti-establishment cryptocurrencies, I'm literally so straight that I expected this to go right across the Visa tracks one day, or today that's mobile apps and social media, and to affect everybody on the planet and not just be a radical lifestyle change. So I just had to mention that. Where would you guys like this to go next? I think it might help people if I walked through a sample transaction, because at the end of talking all this theory, people often ask, yeah, but how does it work? And so what do you think of a walk through a transaction?
I think that would be great to see how it works. And did we complete our thread when the commercial came? Were you done with your last thoughts on that?
I think close enough, other than to say, again, the reason this is beyond left versus right, the right gets suspicious when you talk about meeting all need on the planet. But when the business model is business-led, market-based, and profit-driven, and simply not trickle down, because there's no fight over the money side of it. There's only the cooperation over the production and distribution side of it. Again, if we had been able to imitate how the sharing economy captured excess capacity and monetized it and started to distribute it, but if we were able to see that this is only a growth in available goods and services, and all that's undermining that is competition over money, then we would see that by monetizing empty college desks, empty restaurant tables, empty airline seats, off hours at the movies, off hours at the fitness clubs, off hours at the beauty salon, we literally would wake up to the fact that we're drowning in wealth and we're searching for money, our own invention, to distribute that wealth. And so again, we're working too long, too hard. It's having a negative impact on families. It's having a negative impact on communities. I don't know too many conservatives who would not want to see a self-funding model that gives people more time for community life, more time for religious and spiritual life, more time for self-improvement, more time for families, more time for missions all over the world. I mean, it's really silly how we're working longer and harder to chase money rather than leveraging technology to raise everybody up together. But you have to think outside the box. You simply can't do it by competing harder in the old paradigm. So how does it work?
One of the things, I want to interject one more thing in here. So I've been looking at all this, and it's like, why is it like this? And I think part of the problem, or part of the equation we have to look at, is that this trickle down concept was introduced by Reagan, and there's a portion of the planet that likes to have all the money, likes to have all the power, likes to have all the control. So in order for this to be enacted around the planet, so we level the playing field and balance everything and everybody gets their needs, we got to look at the faction that really doesn't want that to happen. And so, and that basically trickle-down economy destroyed the middle class. So go ahead. Who's talking? Go ahead. Is that you, Joe?
Yeah.
Who was that? So, go ahead.
Okay. So Alvin Toffler, a futurist, talked about the evolution of power. I'm really glad you brought up power, because there's such a myth about how much power the rich have and how much they're gobbling up society's resources. So first I'm going to say there's not a rich family alive on the planet that can eat enough food to cause one person to go hungry. There is not a rich family on the planet that lives in a big enough house to cause one person to be homeless. There's not a rich family on the planet that caused the 2008 downturn or the current economic crash based on the coronavirus. That's all the myth that a few evil people are running the show, when in fact we have a broken economic system that was inherited from long before anybody alive today was even born and could have had any input into it. Now I know there's a lot of people that'll give pushback on that, but I'm going to argue those people aren't getting us anywhere, whereas disruptive business models are a whole nother thing. So what Alvin Toffler said, there's been an evolution in power, and you will see in a minute why we've got to get out of this mindset of a few evil people are running the show. So it used to be power was violence. Power was the biggest club or the biggest gun or the biggest army. And then at a certain point we realized, oh my God, money has more power than violence. You get more work out of someone by paying them than by beating them. And global corporations, in fact, became more powerful than governments and their armies in terms of influence on the planet. Now, it was mostly economic development influence. Was it evenly shared? Not at all. Did some people get way richer than others? Absolutely. But we're saying it's a blind spot in free enterprise to have massive food side by side with hungry people. If we give a profit motive to the distribution of that food to those hungry people, and of course there's work for them to do in their communities. There's housing to build. There's schools to build. There's clinics to build. There's clinics to staff. There's schools to staff. I mean, there's seniors to take care of here and around the world. There's plenty of work to do, and therefore, in what I'll demonstrate in a minute, a dual currency transaction, part dollars, part recovery dollars, there's plenty of money to be made from a dual currency innovation that spreads more wealth around. But okay, so we went from violence as power to money as power. But you see, Toffler then pointed out that ideas have more power than money. The biggest, most powerful corporation can be brought to its knees by a disruptive business model, which is exactly what the sharing economy began to do, but it only got so far in the competitive dollar economy. So when we create a truly win-win, spread the wealth model that is business-led, market-based, and profit-driven, but is not trickle-down, we can satisfy the right, we can satisfy the left, we can make families healthy again, we can reduce crime, we can begin to dismantle prisons, we can trade economic development for disarmament. There's so much creativity, and we have far more resources than money is releasing into the world. Now, let's talk about how this works. So what we create, think about how new economics creates new economic institutions. I'm going to start actually with politics. I'm going to start with kings and queens being replaced by democracy. So there was a lot of innovation that had to go on to go from kings and queens to democracy. Under kings and queens, we didn't have elections. We didn't have a constitution or a bill of rights. We didn't have an executive, a judiciary, and a legislative branch and a balance of powers. We didn't have property rights. We didn't have the enforcement of property rights, and on. We had kings and queens and their legions kind of running the show and having the ownership or the right to everything, and everyone else was paupers. And then, middle class craftspeople began to grow up, and business became a counterforce to nobility. But look at how much innovation took place. So now, free enterprise created hospitals and colleges and unimaginable banks and different kinds of money and different kinds of money transfer systems and Visa and PayPal, and the list just goes on. And then high tech created Microsoft and Google, and in between it created every manner of local and regional and global infrastructure. And so this isn't only about everything's being run by global corporations in the future. In fact, at the heart of human-centered design and human-centered economics is what's called right scale. And so while you can't simply turn the global economy over to neighborhood businesses, neighborhood food co-ops and neighborhood restaurants would be completely overrun by demand. So obviously people are voting with their dollars, and they're voting for many types of corporate big box retailers and national and international chains. And so, but when everybody has enough purchasing power to actually start making choices, you will find a couple of kinds of evolution in business. We already have a swelling up of artisan businesses, of neighborhood-based or local community, high-quality coffee shops, high-quality art shops, high-quality restaurants, and on and on. But, we also have lots of restaurant owners who are sick and tired of working 24/7, 365 and barely making ends meet, and that's also based on competition over money. So it's a little hard for you to imagine, just like it would be hard to imagine democracy under kings and queens or paper currency and banking under gold coins and barter. But just imagine that people start having all kinds of freedom of choice, and they literally will be able to take their paycheck with them. So if you want to run a small business, it'll be much more viable. If you are sick of running a small business and want to do something creative out there, that's going to be possible. Again, Peter Drucker explains beautifully how each generation can't imagine what's coming by the next generation. And, our parents' generation couldn't have imagined the high-tech era and the banking as we know it. And we have no idea what our abundance will produce in terms of cooperation. But let me just show the baby steps to take us in that direction. And I'm going to give a metaphor, and then I'm going to give a walkthrough what we call a dual currency transaction. The metaphor is this. Lots of people understand that when you don't have the money to get something done, you often turn to barter or trade, meaning I've got something, you've got something, let's barter or trade. But there's two kinds, and we're stuck with those two kinds until I invented a third. And I've got patents. I haven't talked at all about my business journey where I'm an inventor, I'm an economic futurist, I'm a social entrepreneur. And where did I come to that? Well, I built a solar company in New Mexico. I worked in the barter industry. So, I've been a Visa thought leader. I've been an entrepreneur of the year, an innovator of the year in the Twin Cities. And of course, I like to admit that I'm 2 years overdue for a 25-year overnight success story. And all these accomplishments and $6 gets me a latte. In other words, I haven't arrived yet, and I'm hoping to be discovered. I have growing teams of people working on many components of this, but I haven't had a major funder show up in a while, and the models that we've built, the near misses that we've built, came before the technology was actually available to build this model. So I'm not going to go into some of the interesting pilots we've done. I'll mention one. We had Hennepin County, Mall of America, the National City Bank, the Minneapolis Foundation, and the Minneapolis Public Schools, and young people were earning community service dollars that they could spend at the mall, but we couldn't scale it. There were problems with the technology in that day. But what we call dual currency technology is everywhere today. And if you want to understand ledger economics, look at the loyalty rewards industry. So this metaphor, well, first of all, metaphor number one, there's business-to-business barter. Hotels trade empty rooms, airlines trade empty seats, the media trades in the trillions, and none of them ever buy a fleet of cars. Why? Because auto executives need airline flights, hotel and motel stays, and advertising. So that's all business-to-business bartering, and it's all taxable. There's individual-to-individual bartering. Watch my kids, I'll give you vegetables from my garden. Fix my car, I'll paint your house. No one had ever designed a model of business-to-individual bartering because no one would be able to take a basket of vegetables down to the Home Depot and try to get a saw. But if you can imagine monetizing all sides of the transaction, so what people are doing in individual-to-individual barter would earn them credits, recovery dollars, that they could then take to the Home Depot or to the coffee shop or to anywhere that's got excess capacity that is now accepting part dollars, and part recovery dollars or part community service dollars. So let me walk through a transaction that makes that simple and clear. So we pool the excess capacity under contracts with merchants into a big business community warehouse of excess capacity. And we do that through what's called a dual currency contract. Enough cash in the deal to work for the merchant, enough new money in the deal to work for the customer and for society. So what does that look like? I'll give two examples, and it helps to understand the economics of discounting, which is basically called the economics of excess capacity, or the economics of the marginal cost of production. So the restaurant industry knows this really well. And the restaurant industry takes its excess capacity and tries to market it with offers like 2-for-1 dining, senior discounts, happy hour, student discounts. Now, everyone knows that you can't just give a discount every time to anybody who walks in the door, because that disrupts your cash flow. So merchants know that a discount comes with restrictions. So what does that look like in the restaurant industry? That looks like 2-for-1 dining, no Friday or Saturday night, which is our most busy time. Senior discounts before 5 and after 7, because we're busy during that peak hour. Happy hour, again, before 5 and after 9. Student discounts, you got to be a student. So certain people only for those discounts. So what does that look like in a dual currency system? Well, let's say Ramona is a homemaker, but suddenly she's getting community service dollars for her at-home cooking, cleaning, shopping, laundry, chauffeuring, childcare, or senior care. So now Ramona takes some of her community service dollars and she sees who's in the system, and she sees that either a community restaurant or, let's say, I had a national chain in mind that I know lots of people love. Well, we'll just say Perkins for now. And she goes in and she goes, let's say, before 5 or after 7 is the restriction during the week, and no Friday or Saturday night. And a $20 meal for Ramona is now 12 cash and 8 community service dollars. Why is that a win-win-win? Because the restaurant made money, much more than a Groupon generally, which is much closer to 50% off minus the Groupon fee, so way less than half. And we're saying 12 cash and 8 community service dollars is closer to 2/3 for the restaurant and 1/3 saving for the customer. And then the win-win-win is the merchant made a extra called an incremental sale and an incremental profit from Ramona. Ramona saved money and stretched her cash, and the community got some community service in the form of her work, and it also has this new type of currency, this ledger currency, the community service dollar or the recovery dollar, to go out and start paying people to do other needed work in communities. It could be it could be adding to the healthcare forces for COVID. It could be more tutors and mentors for our youth. I mean, the list goes on and on. So you go ahead, Sasha. I hear you want to input, and then I want to give one more example.
The image I got is of defragging and realizing how much space you really have in your cooperative computer. Your system defrags, and that's what I think that's what's happening. I think it's brilliant.
This is why we're friends with conservatives, because what do conservatives believe in? They believe in economic efficiency. They don't think it's efficient to start a bunch of government programs when we already are flooded with private sector programs. They don't believe in starting a bunch of nonprofit programs. Well, we now have public-private nonprofit competing with hospitals, colleges, fitness clubs, or whatever. So let's make it more efficient by making it affordable to people who previously couldn't afford it. And if you want to take a bite out of the healthcare problems we're having, get people healthier, make sure that they're getting time to work out and that they're getting good coaching in their workout and they're getting good health coaching in their diet and in their exercise and in their preventative health behaviors. Now, let me just show the pricing of a second type of industry. Let's say a fitness club, where off hours at a fitness club, off hours at a restaurant, you still got the cost of the food. Even though the fixed costs don't go up any. You don't pay more for the rent, more for the utilities, more for the debt service, more for the management team. Those are all called fixed costs. That's why it's so profitable for merchants to give discounts if they properly restrict the use of those discounts. So let's take off hours at the YWCA. So the restaurant was a for-profit. The YWCA is a non-profit. A $20 weekend pass to the YWCA might cost only 6 cash and 14 community service dollars. Why? Because the marginal cost of production, the incremental cost of off hours at the YWCA is just a hot shower and a towel. So Y is making just as much off their 6 in cash as the restaurant's making off their 14 in cash because of their cost of the food. So now what we've created, and this is, if you like it, this is what you're liking. We're creating an industry standard while the free enterprise system's busy competing over the dollar. It's busy cooperating over the capture and distribution of its excess capacity using the community service dollar, which is pure cooperation. So when you have a dual currency price, the relative, the ratio between the dollar and the recovery dollar, which I'm going to argue can speed recovery beyond what the dollar alone can do. But the dollar is still there distributing what's scarce. The recovery dollar is helping to distribute what's abundant. And the ratio between them is determining the relative scarcity and the relative abundance or sufficiency of the product or service. What the hell does that mean? It means that for sure, there aren't Rolls Royces and mountain villas for everybody to have one. But the problem in the global economy isn't that everybody doesn't have a Rolls Royce or a mountain villa. The problem in the global economy is that food's an abundant renewable resource while people go hungry. Housing is easy to build while people go homeless. College educations are literally falling off the shelves, and if supply and demand were real, the cost of a college education would be falling through the floor. But in fact, it's a whole nother question of how does supply and demand show up when supply isn't just what's available to be bought for cash, but what's actually sitting there as excess capacity, and demand isn't just cash demand, it's unmet need here and around the world. And suddenly we have the ability to consider supply, cash supply, and available capacity, and demand, cash demand, and unmet need. So suddenly supply and demand go to a whole new level of meeting global need that isn't possible with a scarce ledger, scarce token currency. The tool of a ledger begins to put huge efficiency into the system, not taking a dime out of anyone's pocket as taxes or as debt. All right. That's the example I want to help with and see what kind of questions are left.
Well, just as much more than just fix things. It shows people, it educates people. Everybody that's in that system is going to understand how things work. It's an educational system too. That's what it looks like to me.
So I want to talk about education because it's a little bit of a misnomer that we educate change into the world. You can't teach an innovation. People have to experience it. What does that mean? And so I'll talk in a minute about minimum viable product and early adopters. That was the perfect question, though, because you literally cannot, Sasha, teach an innovation into the world. If you had tried to teach the internet into the world, it would have sounded like science fiction. If you had tried to teach the PC into the world, there would have been no market for it whatsoever. If you had tried to teach Facebook into the world, so how did each of these get into the world? So a book called Lean Startup explains the concept of minimum viable product, early adopters. So minimum viable product is the baby step, the DNA of the innovation. So what was it for the internet? It was that the campuses and the Department of Defense were trading information securely. That was the part that got built out. And then the early adopters, students and techies, looked at that and they said, oh my God, OMG, what could we do with that besides secure exchange of information between the DoD and the campuses? They said, well, why don't we try chat rooms? Why don't we try email? Why don't we try websites? And pretty soon, the global information superhighway was exploding into existence as a business model. People were making money, building things, consulting, and on and on. Facebook. What was the minimum viable product of Facebook? You couldn't in your wildest of dreams gotten people to start working on something that was so big as Facebook was going to grow up to be. So what was it? It was campus directories, electronic digital campus directories, baby step, and then some Yahoo hangs a girl's picture on the on Facebook, and suddenly there's all this voting going on, but that got eclipsed almost immediately. I mean, it's a pathetic moment in time, sexist as can be, but it was very quickly eclipsed by building Facebook pages so that it was safe for your granny to go out and hang family pictures on Facebook. So it exploded into the world through campus student early adopters, but it very quickly evolved into much more than campus directories and voting on girls' pictures. Wikipedia, I'm going to give one more example. Who built the first online encyclopedia? It was Microsoft. How come Microsoft didn't keep the lead? Because somebody creatively hung a free, innovative. Microsoft not only had the lead, they had all the money, all the technology, and all the expertise. And I'm not bashing Microsoft because they've done tons of other stuff, but Wikipedia showed a bunch of creative early adopters how to do it for free, and Wikipedia ran circles around Microsoft's effort at an online encyclopedia. Minimum viable product, early adopters, that's just how we're going to do it. Back to questions.
Hey, Joe,
go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We've got about a half hour left, and I do want to cover how does all this translate into the medical field, because a lot of that has been monetized, and people don't want to let control of that, but there are cures for the diseases they never let out, and also the energy field. We have all kinds of, I have these whistleblowers come on, and they say we already have M-Drive, we have, all these high-tech things, and they're just not letting it out. In fact, they made that decision the turn of the last century to go with, to leave Tesla behind and not use his technologies. We've been in a different world. So we still have that problem. It's not all, about profit and all that stuff. It's about these people that just don't want these things to go out there. How do we get past those things?
Yeah. So, I'll talk about, energy, and what was your first thing?
That they have monetized the medical field.
Healthcare.
Healthcare, yes. What do we do about that?
Healthcare and energy. I want to bring up, so a favorite leftist complaint is who killed the electric car, and supposedly big corporations killed the electric car. Well, matter of fact, you see the electric car exploding into the world, and those same big companies are the ones building the electric car. So what happened was the market wasn't ready. See, this is where conservatives think leftists are just crazy because everything's a conspiracy now. Yeah, there were people fighting the electric car, but they never could have stopped it if the market was ready. So if every innovation that we make wildly affordable, I'm going to show you exactly how healthcare can become wildly affordable, just like the market is starting to scale the electric car. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to, mass transit is going to be electronic, trains. We don't need so many cars because think of the number of people who are starting to trade a car for an Uber ride, and the price of an Uber or a Lyft ride will fall through the floor when the labor costs are being paid eventually in recovery dollars. Again, it's a little hard to picture, but if you see how far the world's come and how fast it's come based on technology in the last couple of decades, again, what did the sharing economy do? It took the excess capacity of solopreneurs. The healthcare industry is drowning in the excess capacity of solopreneurs. They're called complementary and alternative healthcare providers, or they're called integrative care providers. They're yoga teachers. They're massage therapists. They're acupuncturists. They are oh my God, the list just goes on and on. You could, I just want to go on and say that if we could monetize the excess capacity of other solopreneurs, we're going to monetize the excess capacity of all these solopreneurs in complementary and alternative medicine. Now, the economics of healthcare is 100% upside down today because of the inheritance of money-centered healthcare instead of, again, people-centered healthcare. But that evolved into society along with the rise of a money economy. I mean, we used to have family doctors making the rounds. Well, we built hospitals, and today, think about this, and this is 100% repairable when you've got a ledger money to start bringing things back into balance. But you don't have to take away anybody's home or anybody's car or anybody's practice, but we're going to get ridiculously healthy. The book Walden 2 by B.F. Skinner describes a utopian community where their money is labor credits, nothing but a ledger currency. And one of the comments is, well, we don't have any more doctors and healthcare providers than our disgustingly good healthcare requires. Why? Because everybody's well fed and well housed and well educated by the community. So what's the upside down nature of healthcare today? Today, a heart attack is a major economic event. Lots of money changes hands from a heart attack. On the other hand, quitting smoking lowers the GDP, the gross domestic product. How crazy is that? It means that heart attacks are more valuable economically than quitting smoking. So what does that look like? It looks like cancer, diabetes, pharmaceuticals, diagnostics are all big economic events. Preventative care, healthy eating, healthy exercise, all the yoga, meditation, all these things that are healthy. And we've got this giant movement underway called LOHAS, Lifestyles of Health and Sustainability. And this is where education does come in. So as we make all of these forms of better self-care more and more affordable, and again, we live in a culture that just doesn't understand that stress is a social disease, addiction is a social disease, and you can't solve it alone. Go home and meditate. Who's got time to go home and meditate when now you run home and you take care of your kids and you race them to, So as we shorten working hours and as we give more attention to families and children, and as more people come on board to share the work, and healthcare coaches, that's a rising, exploding field, and healthcare coaches have excess capacity. I know tons of coaches who don't have enough clients, but when people can pay for healthcare coaching in community service dollars, and the brand we use for healthcare is what we call Health Bucks. You can earn health bucks from healthy activities, taking your kids to to preventative checkups and doing wellness activities like quitting smoking and like donating blood. And, again, this is so little time. If I tried to describe democracy under kings and queens in 2 hours, if I were trying to describe capitalism in 2 hours, you can tell what a small portion of the story I'd be able to tell. So now apply everything I just said to let's fund up alternative energy, solar, hydro, geothermal. Let's downsize funding for non-renewable energies, oil, gas, coal. And these are all big market trends, but they're trickling into the market at the pace of traditional dollar funding. They can be exploding into the market. And the one thing to understand is in this process, no wealth is ever lost. So there isn't a person on the planet who has to give up their home or their extra car or whatever. That'll just go out of style as a lifestyle. Why? Because people have better things to do than be consumers. I'm going to put a check here so you can ask more questions. But the discussion of quality of life and why consumerism and growth can easily one day be replaced by more family time, more spiritual and religious time, more community time, more global economic development time. All these things that people love to do but don't have time for, that's the economy of the future, is all I can tell you in a short set of examples. Sasha, are you trying to get a word in edgewise?
No, but, a lot of what you're saying reminds me of some of Ralph Nader and others saying, consumers are such a power. We made it so that the people that were picking grapes got a decent living because people refused to do grapes and raisins that were off the back of labor
Absolutely.
slaves.
We got McDonald's styrofoam out of the market because of the power of consumer choice. We got the whole socially responsible investing industry out of consumer choice. It's powerful.
Right. Sasha, I think when you turn your mic on, you must have it up too high because it starts feedback right away. I wanted to give Deborah a chance. Did you have a question or comment or feedback?
I did. One of the questions I want to know is, as a society, what would be the first steps to start moving in this direction? And then my second question is, how do you get the politicians to buy in?
Two great questions, Stitch. So, number one, the first steps are to do exciting ways for people to earn and spend community service dollars. Just imagine this. You've probably all heard of a global organization called Global Citizen. And what Global Citizen is, they took the old idea of Live Aid, Farm Aid, Band Aid, Concerts for the Environment. These are things that young people saw in Bohemian Rhapsody that they didn't grow up with. But Hands Across America, Concerts for the Environment was U2 and Dave Matthews Band and Kenny Loggins, kind of old-timers now. But imagine if Taylor Swift and if Beyonce threw a concert and the only way to get in was for young people to go out and earn some community service dollars. And this is the kind of thing that Global Citizen, anybody who hasn't heard of it should look it up. It's sponsored by Oprah, Citibank, Procter & Gamble. And it's trying to get young people to do good, but they don't have this new ledger currency to turbocharge it. So when we get our technology finished and our pilots up and running, we fully expect to partner with groups like Global Citizen and with the biggest superstars, including sports superstars. Do you know how fast you could fill an extra superstar game with young people running around doing acts of kindness or environmental acts? We could lower the cost of solar systems overnight by young people volunteering their time to help offset photovoltaics and solar water heating systems and all that, and pay them in things that they love, eating out in restaurants and hanging out in tap rooms and going to dances and concerts. All that stuff is very low marginal cost of production. Imagine a superstar concert in an empty stadium. Not only if the superstar donates the time, the stadium owners can donate the space, and then they make their money off refreshments. Everybody wins. So I could go on and on giving you examples of early adopter ways to get this thing exploding into the world around causes like the environment, healthcare, youth academic performance, and on and on. Politicians, let me tell you, I don't mean for this to be insulting. I just mean it to be factual. Politicians are opportunists. Politicians will chase every popular cause and say, hey, I'm Al Gore. I invented this. No offense. So politicians just need to begin to see that the world is sick of poverty. The world is sick of war. The world is sick. The public does not vote for poverty. The public does not vote for war. The public does not vote for disparities. And we can wipe out disparities overnight at the pace of mobile apps, at the marginal cost of production. I mean, it's poverty and disparities are 100% a money phenomenon. And unfortunately, women and communities of color are trying to fight their way into the trickle-down model of closing disparities, which is never going to work. But when we demonstrate the possibility of an overnight explosion of resources pouring into the world, then it's not about adding a person of color or a woman to a board. It's about building masses of new and innovative enterprises that on an equitable basis. This new model is going to come into the world. We have, I think it's hanging on your site right now. Augsburg University has an enterprise called the Forum on Workplace Inclusion, and Tom Fisher, University of Minnesota's 10 times published author and global lead in human-centered design, and my co-author in a book that's coming out on all of this stuff pretty soon. He and I did a DEI podcast, a 1-hour podcast on how the DEI movement can step into the leadership void and start, instead of trickle-down models, and let's get a few new female billionaires and a few more people of color billionaires, but leave the masses of women and the masses of people of color as second-class citizens. We can mobilize the available wealth just like we did for World War II, and in 18 months, 75 years later, with hundreds of times the technology, imagine the pace of building a diverse, equitable, and inclusive economy rather than fighting over dollars and hoping that better results will one day trickle down. So the answer, Stitch, to your question about the politicians, first and foremost, politicians are going to be elected left and right, no pun intended, on a dual currency platform, on a DEI platform, on a sustainability platform, on a healthcare for all platform, on a jobs for all platform, which just doesn't exist today. And instead of spending millions and millions of dollars on campaigning to convince people that your story is the best, politicians are going to have to run on a platform of what did you do? Think about this. If we spent all that money, all that volunteer time, and all that media time on proving that you have a model that works, what would the elections look like? They'd look like mobilizing people into action, just like the World War II example of a mobilization, rather than buying things into existence. The other thing is, if Dancing with the Stars can poll millions and millions of votes in 5 minutes, do you think we could do better than once every 4 years spending all that time and money? People could vote day in and day out, and they could vote as conservatives, and they could vote as liberals, and then here comes our program of mass customization. Mass customization, I know we're going to be running out of time, so I'm really glad politics came up before this is over. Mass customization comes from the business world, and it says you don't need 1,000 bicycle shops to create 100,000 different kinds of bikes. You have a single bicycle factory creating from 100 kinds of seats, 100 kinds of gears, 100 kinds of frames, 100 kinds of paint jobs, 100 kinds of tires. And so mass customization is just like the Whopper slogan, have it your way. And instead of fighting one another over money and fighting one another over what society could look like, the pro-abortion people are going to have huge communities of people that don't earn and spend on abortion. They earn and spend on alternatives to abortion, adoption, creative families where a single mom who isn't ready to give away a baby becomes part of a family that welcomes her into the family. I mean, I could go on and on with all the creative solutions available to every problem, drugs and war and things like that, when you have all the money you need to create an alternative. Why do we have crime? Crime is a poverty problem. Crime is a, hey, let's make a lot of money off of prisons problem rather than a lot of money off of, and prisons can become some of the most creative homeless shelters around because they have cafeterias and they have staffs and they have educational programs. But this is a whole nother, because people, just like the fight used to be owls versus loggers, nobody has to lose their family income over the change of preferences in the market. That's just craziness. We have more wealth every day of the week, and nobody has to lose their family livelihood over a choice of guns versus butter. While we still need guns, there'll be guns, but there'll be no lack of butter. That's just an old-fashioned way of framing the choices in the economy. We have artificial scarcity that makes artificial choices. We have plenty of work for everybody. We have plenty of products and services for everybody. Let's monetize excess capacity into a win-win, stretching of the dollar rather than end run on the dollar. And let's be polite about it. Let's quit shoving picket signs up people's noses. Buckminster Fuller said it beautifully. He said, you don't change society fighting the old model. You build a new model that makes the old model obsolete. And so God bless the protesters with their good hearts. God bless law enforcement. There's a handful of bad apples, and there's a lot of stressed out police officers doing things the wrong way. That's repairable. That is repairable.
Are you gonna, Joel? Are you gonna outline all of these issues in your book? Because it seems like you're just touching the surface, but there are solutions. Yes. And if you could flesh that out, if we can give people something to wrap their heads around, and they can really read into it. Maybe it's a whole website dedicated to all these Q&As.
We're working on it. We're working on it as fast as we can, and you have the right idea. And so, again, our DEI podcast goes a lot deeper into, how that particular issue works. Some of the podcasts talk more about the environment. And I just need more help. So people go out and LinkedIn, volunteer your time, volunteer your funding. We need writing help. We need branding help. We need technology help. And so thank you guys for this opportunity to go a little deeper than we did last time. And I can tell that you guys are doing a better job of coming up with questions because your heads were spinning the last time. And that's all it takes is a couple of passes through this, and it's not such a crazy new idea anymore.
I have one final question because we have about 4 minutes before the show goes off the air. How are you adapting this to the COVID pandemic?
Sure. So I wish the system was up and running. Again, we're fighting COVID with a handful, a tiny part of the population. Our whole model is about mobilization. And, the fact that some young people can get sick and a tiny number of them die, when we send young people off to war, we risk their lives all the time and huge numbers of them die. So to do a war on COVID, to give our overworked nurses and our burned out doctors and our our burned out support staffs all the help they need. You know, we can't replace nurses. We can't replace doctors. We can't replace all kinds of healthcare professionals, but we sure as hell could mobilize and expand facilities at 10 times the rate we're expanding them. And we could, you know, it took us a while using the old cash model, but imagine if there was nearly an unlimited supply of money like there was for World War II to get the job done, and then suddenly there'd be much greater education and there'd be much greater, people could go to a casino. We could dedicate whole casinos with their restaurants to COVID recovery, and people could be having fun instead of infecting others. I mean, there's so many ways to think outside the box. But imagine if billions of dollars, again, just like the sharing economy, I'm not making this up. The sharing economy just had to go at the pace of dollars and had to be win-lose. But the sharing economy was grabbing and mobilizing unemployed people and excess business resources like an empty car or an empty home. Imagine taking this to scale across the entire U.S. and global economies, how much we could get done in a matter of months using modern technology.
Be up and running. Do you have any time frame when this will be up and running?
How soon will we be ready? So we only have a minute left. All I can tell you is this is going to come into the world at the pace that we get supported at. And so far, I've looked like a fringe nutcase talking about this, but more and more people are catching on, and I think help is arriving. Thanks, you guys. Thank you so much. Joel Hodroff on LinkedIn, JoelHodroff. Joel Hodroff on LinkedIn. Let me know that you heard about it on Revolution Radio. And we're peaceful revolutionaries. We're not we're not crazy revolutionaries.
This show is Stargate to the Cosmos, so let Joel know you saw it on the Janet and Sasha Lessin's show, Stargate to the Cosmos. I think you were on Sacred Matrix last time, but it would be nice to track. And then when you get your website up, Joel, I put it up on my pages because these show pages stay up. I do distribute to about 24 platforms. You
guys are you are my only Revolution Radio programs, and so they can say it either way. They can name your particular program, or if it's easier to remember Revolution Radio, they can say that.
Excellent.
Thanks, you guys. I had a blast again. We'll do the podcast. We'll do the slideshow.
We are all one. We're all in this together.
Right.
Getting better all the time. We're all